Not
Yeah,
because it's immoral or anything, but just because it doesn't look good for the rest of the world.
that's right. It's bad optics,
Indeed.
as
But that's that
Hillary would say. Oh, you
that
looked up
is
that
more than true.
word?
Okay, so there's a bunch of articles about this. Very interesting.
So
So
Zachary
one,
Foster, the guy who was in that clip, he's from Princeton University. He's a professor in Jewish studies, and he has a lot of good anti-Hasbara kind of kung fu techniques for these types of conversations. So you'll see a couple more clips of him tonight throughout. But let's good. Let's look up this word that was used by Herzl to
okay,
describe
yeah,
Eastern
yeah,
European Jews.
all right. So, and this actually, I had first heard this from a Hasidic intellectual, an intellectual part of the Hasidic community, probably in New York, probably in 2014 or 2015. So, what's interesting about that is that was the first claim, and he was reading directly from, I believe, letters from Herzl, um, and obviously, I think also referencing this Die Welt news article in German or in Germany at the time where this reference was made. But I'll never forget this Hasidic intellectual also quoting a number of his letters where he doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on this very specific concept. So, what is this concept? Mauschel is an article written and published by Theodor Herzl in 1897. The text appeared in the paper Die Welt, which was to become the principal outlet for the Zionist movement down to 1914. It was published roughly a month after the conclusion of the first Zionist conference. I'll get to this in a second. Let's first just give some what is this about? Herzl believed that there were two types of Jews, Jiden or Yids and Juden Jews, and considered any Jew who openly opposed his proposals for a Zionist solution to the Jewish question to be a Mauschel. The article has often been taken since its publication to be emblematic of an anti-Semitic strain of thinking in Zionism and has been described as an anti-Semitic rant. So here's the etymology of the word. The word Mauschel is an epithet which is formed from the verb Mauscheln, quote, to speak German with a Yiddish accent, end quote. One etymology derives it from the Yiddish Moshele, or little Moses, et cetera, et cetera. The German writer and theologian translated as Malsis, evoking the verminous creature or orthographically and phonetically. So you can sort of see the etymological evolution into this, like, sort of, this creature, this thing to be disgusted. Mauschel is attested from the 17th century as a word for a haggling Jewish trader, but the term's meaning was then extended to refer pejoratively to Judeo-Germans generally, regardless of the quality of their German. The connotative sense of both forms extends from hustling and swindling to insincerity and duplicitous or generally dishonorable behavior. So, okay, now there's a bunch of mentions at the top of this article saying this article is written like a personal reflection, personal essay, argumentative essay. The neutrality of this article is disputed, and it says then that the article possibly contains original research. So if I scroll the whole way down, interestingly enough, it's well sourced from many academic sources. Theodor Herzl's diaries is a Bildungsroman, Jewish social studies, Stephen Beller, Herzl Wagner, and the ironies of true emancipation. So there's a whole bunch of scholarly works here for which this is referenced, but it's apparently in dispute. But let's continue forward. Let's see if there's any other articles where they're not in dispute. And here's the article, by the way. You guys can look. It's if you take this first sentence from the article, we can literally see in front of us, unless that's somehow AI generated, and we type in this into the search engine. Mauschel ist anti-Zionist. That's the first line of the article. So, okay. Well, so now we have to go back and make sure that this is a real thing. But, right now, let's give it the benefit of the doubt just to continue forward. Now, I went to this. This is about early Jewish anti-Zionism. Anti-Zionism before 1948. So, what do they say here? Um, and this is an article just about anti-Zionism. So, if we go to Mauschel, it says here, Herzl's proposal initially met with broad, vigorous opposition within Jewish intellectual, social, and political movements. A notable exception, let me make this bigger for everyone. A notable exception was the religious Mizrahi movement. In his essay, Mauschel, Herzl called Jews who opposed his project "quote unquote" Yids and not true Jews. Among left-wing currents within diaspora Jewish communities, strong opposition emerged in such formations as the Bundism, as I mentioned earlier many times on the town hall, autonomism, folkism, Jewish communists, territorialism. These are all various ideas of way to rally sort of identity for the Jewish people. And many of them didn't involve a state. Bundism did not involve a state. That was a sort of socialist movement out of the pogroms that probably took place in like the ninth under what the Tsar of Russia. in the early 20th century. So, anyways, and it says here the Jewish section of the Communist Party in the Soviet Union created to combat quote unquote Jewish bourgeoisie. So this goes on to target the Zionist movement and managed to close down its office, so forth and so on. So the point, though, is that here they're claiming issue with the article. And then here I go to anti-Zionism, and this has three references, and a reference to the religious Mizrahi movement. Let's talk about Yids and Jews. So all these, it's well sourced. So we go down here, Schindler, Arad, Porat, they all see anti-Zionism versus anti-Semitism. This is the Cambridge Companion to Anti-Semitism. That's where the reference comes from. Here's another one, the Holocaust in the Soviet Union, University of Nebraska Press. And the other one associated with that was Schindler, Israel and the European left between solidarity and delegitimization, Bloomsbury Publishing USA. So it seems to be well researched, and both seem to be saying the same thing. Huh. So then I did one more thing. I went around to see what can I find a
That's
translation of the
why it's
initial.
anti-Semitic, though, Tony, because it's inconvenient
Oh.
to the narrative. That's another synonym for it. Like if you read down to the third definition, it's like when inconvenient for the official narrative, throw anti-Semitism out.
What an incredible weapon. Words as weapons,
You can
everyone.
almost make it happen on
Anti-Semitism.
demand. Like if I covered this story, people would say, "Oh, that's anti-Semitic. Don't you want them settling?" Well, this is the place where they're not supposed to settle, though. And it's like at 200 houses per housing plan, this is like 15 new housing developments. All of a sudden, ordered right after the US said, hey, don't do that. Everybody's looking right now. And these illegal settlements, they might have to tear them down. That's what some people are talking about out there in the political world.
I hope
And
there's enough
so, and
pressure
it's,
internationally to help. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah, and
they're
it's
obviously
on,
been saying, yeah.
they got construction going all over the place. I mean, it's just going on, right? And I call them red roof inns because if you don't know, those nice red terracotta roofs not only are special for Israelis and Palestinians can't have those, but they're also useful for the IDF. Like if they're flying over, they can tell which is like the friendlies. They got the red terracotta roofs, and you can tell where all the settlements are. So you make sure you don't hit the friendlies because friendly fire is something that they put up there right like next to protecting civilians over there. It's
The
very
blood of the lamb
serious.
for Passover, huh? The blood of the lamb. God, these
Just
people
a
are
little.
absurd. It is just literally absurdity. So this is the first. Supposedly, I'll just read this, and this will end my little soliloquy here. This is apparently the translation I found of that first that Die Welt news article in German back in 1890 Germany 1897 18 somewhere in there. It says here Theodor Herzl, Zionist Writings, Essays, and Addresses, Volume 1, January 1896 through June 1898, translated by Harry Zone, New York, Herzl Press, 1973. Mauschel is an anti-Zionist, just as I pointed out from copying the actual article. Mauschel ist anti-Zionist. We have known, we have known him for a long time, and our gorge has risen whenever we looked at him, whenever life brought us near or in contact with him. But until now, along the disgust we felt, there had always been pity. Disgust and pity is how he looks at these Jews that aren't his type of Jew, this nationalistic, idealistic Jew, which
Ones who didn't want to
embraces
move,
nation state. Yeah, the ones that didn't want to move and appealed more to the religious idea, ideas and the Torah
even
and
though the
stuff like
people
that.
proposing it weren't religious, right? I mean,
You got
they
it.
had
So
some like these were people movers.
yeah, yeah,
Long
exactly.
history of that sort of thing.
So, and then it just continues. It says, like, we kept looking for charitable historical explanations for the fact that he is so spineless, repressed, and shabby a chap. After all, he is a fellow Jew, even though there is not the slightest reason to be proud of this kinship. We told ourselves that we would have to tolerate him, indeed, that it was our lofty task to refine him, and that all of us would develop through this task. And with a kind of romantic tenderness or weakness, we took an interest in him because he was a scoundrel. When Mauschel did something shabby, we tried to hush it up. When Mauschel was really vile, we reminded the world of the great men of our people. When Mauschel compromised all of us, we were ashamed or we fumed in secret, but we kept silent. And so you can sort of see the tone uh, with which Theodor Herzl, segregates his own religious slash ethnic community in which he, drives identity and kinship.
So we title this clip How Herzl Influenced Hitler. Because those ideas right there that he wrote to recruit for his cause were also utilized later by the group called the National Socialists. And those National Socialists used ideas like that and probably also attributed, hey, this is what Herzl's saying about his own people. Isn't this messed up? As a recruiting thing for them. Long
That's right.
history of that type of stuff. And it's not good. And the fact that, again, it all comes back to the tone deafness of the people driving the narratives today and the poor sense of timing and the unironic nature of their, saying things like final solution, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, right? All these sort of things that we've covered already in this episode. These are not good things. These are like an ominous continuity of history that you see unfold. One's like too numb to the history that's happened, so they're doomed to repeat it.
And to give context, just real quick, like the other that Hasidic intellectual I had referenced earlier, I watched back in 2014-15, give a presentation to his local community about why they support a sort of anti-Zionist perspective. Just found basically reiterated the same thing. He not only brought up the Mauschel, but he also brought up the concept, or he brought up letters where he basically embellished those ideas, Herzl that is, by saying that like denouncing the religious Jew as being weak and shabby and silly and sort of like all this sort of, or sinewy, excuse me, and all these sorts of like this disgusting qualities are not like strong men of like have a national spirit who practice gymnastics. He would go in to say like they need to be athletic. They need to, it's that, as though they're building up a sort of nationalistic state, preparing a military. Huh. This
Almost like a
very
National Socialism type training
it
system.
was very similar, man.
Huh.
It was very similar. Seemingly, it's hard. The parallels are, well, quite ominous.
Isn't that
Shout out
also a
to
Metallica song, Sad But True?
Sabbath True indeed, not
All
the
right,
Black
now we got a
Album.
theme for tonight. All right, so next up, we got breaking points. IDF chief, stop posting TikTok war crimes. Then we're going to Novara. IDF chief, stop posting revenge videos. They're at least getting it now, right? After 4 months. Then we got a clip from DW News, and then we're going to end it with Brianna from The Hill about the Hamas rape narrative collapsing due to people figuring out there's not a whole lot of evidence after all these hyperbolized claims. Everyone was fine with it for 4 months until Bibi, Shmuley, and Ogles said something this week, and everyone's like, that 1/3 of the people got shot in the generals and were female and got their breasts cut off and passed around like footballs. It seems we should probably look into that. That seems like an important story. So let's go to this block and then we'll discuss.
This is another report actually from Jeremy Diamond that we have a piece of over at CNN. Let's take a look at that.
This is a how-to video on how to blow up a mosque in Gaza. Format is internet fluent. The content is very real. Filmed, edited, and posted on Instagram by an Israeli soldier. It's one of dozens reviewed by CNN. For many in 2024, social media is everyday life. Israeli soldiers are no different, except they're fighting Israel's largest and most brutal war in decades. In video after video after video, soldiers document the destruction of Gaza and rejoice. They film detonations to use as wedding invitations. Among them are would-be comedians, whose videos satirizing the war show the devastation in Gaza.